All right. Well, hello, my name's Ben, and I am the founder and technical director of CLW. And we do basement waterproofing in a consultancy role. And I wanted to introduce you to Andrea, and I'm not quite sure how this will go, but I wanted to try and record a video log of Andrea's journey because Andrea is new to CLW, and I think his journey into basement waterproofing consultancy could be really interesting to other construction professionals. So, um, Andrea, tell us about yourself.
Hi everybody. My name is Andrea Maugeri. I'm an architect, RIBA registered architect. I joined CLW as a new practice director. Um, yes, it's I think it's interesting because it's a kind of like a interesting step because my background is pretty much like architecture. I'm specialized in sustainable architecture. And then in the last, I would say 10 years, I work entirely in residential projects, major extension, listed building, a lot of listed building. And I had also like the opportunity to work in some basement. So yeah, I remember like when I started having a conversation with Ben, one of the questions is like, have you ever done like waterproofing detail? And I said, oh yeah, of course, I'm a master, as any architect might think about it. And yes, and now I have to say that like now I'm on the other side. Wow, it's been like so far the past like how long it was, like a couple of weeks, was like a very intense journey so far. Yes.
Right. Good. So you're a qualified architect. You've got, I think, well over 10 years experience. I feel like you've worked in, which countries have you worked in?
Um, so my background is I studied in Italy, but I worked in Spain. Then I worked for 2 years and a half in Warsaw for a quite large architecture practice based in Warsaw. It was actually a British practice based in Warsaw. And
Okay.
then I moved to the UK where I wanted to specialize myself in listed buildings. It's where I started like my journey in residential mainly.
Mhm.
And then like the last 8 years that I worked as architect here in London. So yeah, this is pretty much like a
Mm.
kind of walk around Europe. Yes.
Yeah. That's great. So I guess from my perspective, so there's myself, Johnny, and Adam, um, and Andrea's just joined us as practice director. And one of the really key things that I want from Andrea is process and organizational competence, which I'm terrible at. But also that with the really deep understanding of design development. So in terms of basement waterproofing, um, we need to interface really well with architects and engineers and everybody else and make sure that we get the right bits of information into the design at the right time. Um, so it's been really fun having Andrea in just on a few meetings so far and being able to ask him, oh, in terms of planning, what's going on here? What is it that we need to get done by REBA stage 3? So that's been great. From your perspective, Andrea, is there anything that you've noticed so far? You're like, oh, I hadn't really realized that, or is it largely a confirmation of what you already did and know in terms of waterproofing that you've done to date?
So I had the chance to talk to project manager, architects, structural engineer in the past few weeks. Been involved in several projects so far, and I have to say, of course, like there is a sort of like a common knowledge, a common like a sense that waterproofing actually falls under the architect or structural engineer realm, which is in a sense, of course, like it makes sense because if you think like the architect or the engineer like should have like overall knowledge about like the whole package of the building. So I would imagine if you mention like a shell and core package, you mentioned that of course you have to understand how each layer works. Now in what I understood, like what is that one? There is a gray area, and actually I understood very much like in the past few weeks. There is a gray area where the limitation of specialization of the architect and engineer. I'm not saying that those consultants are not great in the construction process. I'm just saying that the limitation of specialization might generate an issue at a later stage. One thing that I really appreciate is the fact that as architect, I wouldn't never appoint or involve a waterproofing specialist at early stage, just because I would leave these elements as a detail at stage 4. Yes, of course, I understand the principle. I understand that I need like a waterproofing detail stage 4, but never would I think like to add a stage 3, where instead like now looking at the implication, especially like in build-ups and requirements, it's something different like that I would take in consideration. It's like something that yes, showed me that a waterproofing specialist is actually a profile that it's needed at a really early stage, especially when we're talking about very complex projects, which the ones that we're working on. Yes.
That's cool. That's great. Good. I guess one more question I would have is you've spent about a couple of weeks with me and the team. Are there any things that you think, oh, the waterproofing guys don't understand this thing that would help us work better with the rest of the team, the project managers, the clients, the architects, engineers?
Well, actually, I haven't thought about this. I would say that they maybe it's because there is not such as still there is not such a conscious of involving a waterproofing design in early stage. There is a sort of like a lack of opportunity for the waterproofing designer to get familiar with the scheme at early stage, which led me to I've seen it. For instance, we looked at so many projects, for instance, planning, and we'll try to dig up information from the planning portal. And one thing that I've seen that perhaps as an architect, I'm trained to look exactly what information I'm looking for the goal. Where perhaps a waterproofing design, often I've seen that they've been given like a very small amount of information, mainly like structure, which doesn't really give you the overall picture. So this limitation of just like think that a waterproofing designer, okay, I will give the structure engineer because of course they're doing like just the waterproofing on structure, but actually the volume is much more complex. The scheme is much more complex, which needs to take in consideration not just the structure but also the usage, also the implication if there is a terrace, how the terrace is used. So, for instance, if you like a heavy-duty terrace, if it's a garden, if it's exposed to perhaps to the rainfall, there is a lot of things that is not taken into account when someone approach the waterproofing design. So this one then leads to perhaps a misunderstanding of some scope of work, which ultimately, of course, affected the program, affect everything.
Yeah, that's really interesting. I think. So we just submitted a tender for Crown Estate earlier this week, and it was such hard work to try and get the relevant information so that we could understand. Well, I don't know what you want to put in the basement. I don't know how dry it needs to be, but you want a price for us to do the design. Well, if the design is going to be a cavity drain system, there's a lot more work than if it's just actually it's already a grade 1B performance, and we'll leave it alone. Yeah. Okay. Well, I think just as an intro to, welcome to CLW. It's great to have you with us. And I don't know quite how often we'll try and do this, but my hope is that we can kind of record something of the journey that you make into the specialist world of waterproofing. And not sure how we'll share that with the rest of the world, but hopefully we can make something that's interesting and useful to others. Thanks, Andrea. It's great to have you with us.
Thank you so much. Bye.